IBUS 75 Test 1 Answer Key. One of the benefits of this class. Let's see. Do we have that? Do we have my little 1, 2, 3, 4 block on that? What's this website? Yeah, probably not. I'm probably going to have to give them this one. Okay, so in my entrepreneur class, the number one thing we talk about is the most important thing is the being in a good market. And I have a little block that has 4 colors and 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to be in a good market. It's better to be in a good market than it is to be a good operator. Because if you're in a good market and you're not a good operator, you can fix your operation to be better. But if you're in a declining market, you really can't change that. AKA my video about ships that you can watch my previous video. Ocean, let's see, number 2. Ocean transportation is a predominant mode of international overseas transport. Now think about that one. Let's see. Okay, so moving cargo from the Far East to the West Coast and the U.S. East Coast, which is really the lanes that I talk about most because LA Long Beach is a key part of that, right? The competing ways that you can get cargo from Asia to the United States is you can bring it on a ship to the West Coast of North America, Canada, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Mexico if you wanted to. Or you could go all water through the Panama Canal up into Houston, up into the East Coast of the United States. Well, the Panama Canal used to only handle ships that would hold roughly 12,000 TEU ships. So they expanded the canal many years ago, almost $1 trillion investment, in order to handle bigger ships. And the ships that couldn't pass through the Panama Canal were called post-Panamax ships. By the time they got around to finishing the expansion of the canal, the carriers have come out with ships that are still bigger, 18,000, 20,000, 22,000 TEU ships. Can't go through the canal anyhow. And so the most really cost-effective way of moving cargo from the Far East to the United States is to bring it to the West Coast, particularly LA Long Beach, and rail it to the inland points, the South, the Midwest, and to the East Coast. Right? I actually wrote my master's thesis on that years and years and years ago. So organizationally, when you look at an organizational chart, you'll have a CEO, which is Chief Executive Officer, then you have functional departments underneath that. And the typical functioning departments are, you're going to have a finance department, you're going to have an operations department, and you're going to have a marketing department. Under the marketing department, there's a subset called supply chain. And supply chain is the actual transaction that goes on with the consumer and the company. You buy a box of Tide at the grocery store, somebody had to get the raw materials, somebody had to get it manufactured, somebody had to get it packaged, right? And it had to get to that store and they had to check it out of the counter. That's supply chain. Logistics is a subset of supply chain. It's the physical movement of that product. Number 5 is pretty straightforward. Okay. One of the benefits of, with these ships getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the ports have to have a couple of things. Number 1, they have to have the land that you can store the containers after they discharge. The second thing they need to have is they need to have highway and rail access that can handle that volume to move it out. But the single most important thing they have to have is these ships get bigger, they get deeper in the water. It's called draft. They have to have deep enough harbors so that they can actually get it next to the dock. When we're routing ships, particularly big ships, it's a lot like the way you route airplanes. You typically won't see a 747 flying between Long Beach and Des Moines, Iowa. They're going to be flown between Los Angeles, which is a major hub, and Chicago. And then you have feeder airplanes to go to the smaller places. It's the same way with ships, right? And so large population centers have an effect on where you're going to route those ships. You need deep water in large population centers. So you could have a really deep port and no people around it, no reason to bring the ship there because you're going to want some of that cargo to be consumed by the local population. Okay, it's part of my, this is part of the entrepreneur class as well. I'll tell you a cute story. So several years ago, my boss, Mike McMullen, and I were having lunch, and he was suggesting that he wanted to have all business classes students make a presentation in every class. And because we're in the psychology business, I was a little reluctant to kind of push people off an emotional cliff. So we chit-chat a little bit, and he says, well, aren't you Mr. Revenue Certainty? Which I am. All I talk about in my other classes is the key to business is having revenue certainty. Another part of that class is, and this relates to logistics as well, one of the projects that we have is highly reliable, cost-effective logistics network, and the key to that is efficiency. The fewer moving parts you have, the fewer mistakes you make, the more reliable it is, and generally speaking, it's lower cost. One of my pitches that I make on a regular basis to students that are in my classes is that in California, there is no excuse for not getting a world-class education. You can go to a public high school, you can take community college courses while you're in high school, you can get 2 years of college at a community college virtually free. You can then go to a Cal State and get your bachelor's degree, and then you can go to any one of the UCs, which are almost all world-class schools, and get a master's degree. So they're very unique about this state. One of the benefits of our internship on those ships, traveling all over the world, is we were immersed pretty quickly into other cultures. We would just literally get dropped in a place. And we'd say, okay, we're here now. Now what? What are the local customs that we have to follow here? There's some interesting stories I can tell you. Laying on the beach, let me rephrase this, passed out on the beach in Sri Lanka with my engine cadet. Sun comes up in the morning, we're laying there, and all of a sudden there's a herd of cattle marching down the beach. Now when you wake up drunk on a beach in Waikiki, you're not expecting cattle. But that's what we had, was cattle. So we go, nah, we better get up. We go find out that in that part of the world, cattle are more important than people. One of the benefits of logistics jobs is it's very difficult to eliminate them. Because even as Amazon is growing, the limiting factor is they've got to have people coming to my door dropping off my boxes. Now, in remote areas, they can use drones. But they will not be using drones in my neighborhood because there's too much traffic, too many combinations in the city areas, right? And so the physical movement of cargo still requires a lot of people. There's a lot of automation going on. This still requires a lot of people. I encourage you to read my CV because the next 2 questions are answered there. Next 3 questions are answered there. That's a good one. Okay, so several years ago I got a complaint from one of my students because I had a ridiculous question on one of my tests, right? I personally don't think it's a ridiculous question. I think it's a very valid question. And it has to do with who makes the best shoes, since we're speaking of culturally. Now, Italians aren't good at everything. We haven't won any wars the last time I checked. The last time I checked, we didn't even qualify for the last World Cup. But the one thing Italians are known for is making the best shoes. And so I'll tell you a funny story. So when I used to travel to Asia, I used to hate taking people with me because they would act inappropriately. Not every Asian country is the same. They're different, and they have different customs. So I have this guy from San Francisco with me, and I go, look, and he's a very generous guy, so anytime we'd go out, it'd always be, because he had worked in a restaurant at some point, he was always very generous with his tipping, right? Tipping the taxi guy or the waitress or whatever. Right? Well, in Japan, you don't tip. It's all part of a service charge, right? So the whole time we're there, he kept going to me, do I hit the guy, do I hit the guy, do I hit the guy? No, you don't hit the guy, you don't hit the guy, you don't hit the guy. We now go from there to Korea, we get out of the taxi cab, he doesn't tip the guy, and the guy pulls a gun on him. So it's kind of important to learn the different characteristics in each country. Okay, that takes care of test number 1.